T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Today I'm the only host. Big Blue is attending some family matters, as many of you guys are aware. Our prayers and thoughts go out to him and his family. And Jaime is on the road, on the search for Bigfoot still. So it'll be just me today. Hope you guys don't mind that. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay in the live chat. Looks like we got a few people in already. Let's see. Yeah, we got about 10 folks watching already. 10 of you guys, members. I'm going to try to do this a little bit more often, maybe twice a month, maybe 3 times a month. Just kind of talk back with you guys and go over some of the things that we've discussed over the week and what's to come in the upcoming week. So let's say hello to those that are here. Oh yeah, George, Steelers fan, Save or Sav, I'm not sure. Meg, how's it going? Crime on a Dime, D Attaway, and Justin Oki. Love to see you guys out here. Thank you so much for being here. And Budford, you too. Thank you. Appreciate you guys joining. So I was just I guess we can start off by going over some of the documents. Let me see. Now, the other day I'd asked if, the other day it came up again, when was law enforcement on Bryan Kohberger? When did they have him as a suspect, right? Kind of want to go into that. And I think that question is answered in this document here. And this is the reply in support of motion for protective order, right? So if we go through here, I'll read through it. It says the state submits this reply to address several defendants' arguments in his objection to the state's motion for protective order, as well as the 2 declarations filed by the defendant in support of his 3rd motion to compel discovery. And let me see if I can find where it says. But in this, document here, it basically states that genetic tree that is created by the FBI isn't created until after there is no lead, right? And so what that tells me is even though they knew Bryan Kohberger's name November 25th or 29th, that doesn't mean that he was their suspect. I think that, I think a lot of people are assuming that when they went and located Kohberger's car on November 29th and looked up his name and looked up the citation that he'd been a part of and looked up his phone number, that he was the only person they had done that to. I'm fairly positive he was one of several hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who drove a white vehicle that was somewhat similar to the vehicle that they were looking for. Now, they had put out there that they were looking for a 2011 13 Hyundai Elantra that was white in color The fact that they went out there and looked and got the information for Bryan Kohberger on his 2015 indicates to me that they weren't just looking at Elantras that were from that 2011 to 13. They had extended it, and they may have also been looking at other vehicles, such as that Nissan Sentra that it's been rumored that they were looking at, or thought that the vehicle may have been. I think it was like a 2019 and 2023 Sentra is what it was possible first. I think it was according to the either the New York Times article or one of the Howard Bloom articles. Either way, um, you know, what that tells me is that they were probably looking at Corollas, you know, any four-door sedan, um, that is white in color from the area, in both cities. And so they may have been looking at thousands of individuals throughout that period of time. And I think that they were going through them and knocking them out fairly quickly, in my opinion. You know, checking had some boxes they needed to check, right? And they had a warrant for the tower that was closest to the victim's residence, and they were pulling phone numbers that may have connected to that tower within a 30-minute time span, right? I mean, a half a mile radius within a 2-hour time span. Now, Kohberger turned his phone off um, 2 hours before the incident, and although he did turn his phone back on during that 2-hour span of 3 and 5 p.m. or a.m. I'm sorry, he was already outside of the radius in which the law enforcement was looking at. What that tells me is that early on, law enforcement probably thought that this was some sort of personal attack, and that when there's like a personal attack, there's not that much planning involved, right? And one of the reasons I think that maybe perhaps they thought that was the severity of injuries to one of the victims, right? We've often speculated that, and based on what Steve Goncalves has said, that Kaylee may have had more severe injuries than Madison or than Maddie, and I think that if that is end up the case, I think that could throw off law enforcement, and that could make them initially anticipate that this was some sort of crime of passion. Now we know that the mayor of Moscow had came out and I think it was very early on in this investigation. If it wasn't the first evening, it was the second day. He had stated that they believe that this was a crime of passion. Now, a lot of people would look at, Bryan Kohberger, and they stated that, oh, he told his neighbor it was a crime of passion. Well, I think Kohberger would have been privileged to the local news of the area and had seen that interview or that press conference that was aired out to the local news where the mayor said that they believe it's a crime of passion. Now, I don't remember if it was the next day or the day after that, but the mayor walked that back. And he said that it could have been a crime of passion. It could have been, a burglary gone wrong. They're still looking at the evidence. And so, for him to have said that initially, though, I think that had to have come from somewhere. And in my opinion, that's probably, that's probably coming from, law enforcement there and their thoughts early on, and I don't blame them. You have a guy like, you have Kaylee, who supposedly has these more severe injuries, who is out of a recent breakup. The boyfriend doesn't live very far. He was with her the night of the incident at the bar. She called him several times throughout the morning. All that lined up right there. I mean, it kind of points an arrow in that direction. Right. And, I don't blame them. I mean, I would have been looking at the same, in the same direction. But then once you interview the suspect and you talk to this person and you download their forensics on their phone and you're able to provide, you're able to look at possible injuries or any of those things and see that there's none. And, maybe use an alibi for for the boyfriend. Maybe he was awake with other people throughout that time. And, there was often a rumor that had went out that it wasn't so much that he was asleep, but, his buddies were telling him something. And I don't know this for sure, not this 100% rumor and speculation. And we're kind of making fun of him because he was kind of, you know, whooped on Kaylee, always answering her calls and stuff. And I think they were making, there's that rumor that they were making fun of him, so he put his phone down. And if that ends up being the case, then those people are going to be witnesses that will say that he wasn't at that house during the time of the incident and that he was where he was. As strong or as weak as you think that alibi is, it is other witnesses that are, or other people like could alibi him. And that's just saying that if that's what that was, he could have been a lot of different things. He could have been asleep. Now, maybe perhaps there is a camera that is out there, like a Ring device that is facing Jack DeCour's, former residence, and you can tell that he never leaves. You know what I'm saying? So that there's that possibility that they had surveillance of his house and they could tell he never left, and that's why they can, corroborate his alibi. And so those things are possible. We don't know what it was that the law enforcement had to clear him, but they did. But I can see early on in this investigation them going in that direction. All right, now let's talk about the IgG and STR and all that other good stuff. So, and this is kind of the thing that I've been saying quite a bit, and it's in this document here, and that is, even if you give the defense, the genetic tree and the homework that the law enforcement used or the FBI used to point in the direction of Kohberger, what are you going to do with it? What difference does it make? What will be the objection or the best optimum goal for the defense by getting that information? And that is to have it thrown out. Right now, I guess maybe they would hope that he could get all the DNA stuff thrown out, but I just don't see how that works, because, and we'll look at this diagram right here. In fact, let me bring this up bigger. And this is a diagram from the state. You have the K-bar knife sheath, and you have the DNA that is extracted at the ISP lab. From there, one sample goes to the STR, which that's once they got the lab, they extracted the DNA. It goes in two different places. One goes to get an STR profile created, and one goes to go get an SNP profile created. The STR profile is basically what's used to test against, other criminals that are currently in prison or have been imprisoned or whatnot that are in CODIS, and or also to compare for direct match against, somebody else's DNA, right? So you have this STR profile that is separate from the SNP profile. So, the SNP profile is what genetic folks do to create that genetic tree, right? And so they split up there. Now, even if something happened on this side, the left side is where that SNP profile is. If something crazy happened, let's just say somebody mishandled, the evidence or the DNA sample, right? And it happened, somewhere in this general side. All right. What would the defense be able to do? They would be able to have that information thrown out, but it's not even being used, and it would have no impact on the information that's on the right side. It's on two different trees or two different limbs. I mean, yeah, you can cut off, this limb, but this limb's all right. This limb over here, which is the STR profile, has nothing to do with the genetic tree. Right. So, I just, and this is what the state is basically explaining in a nutshell as well. Like, they're not using this evidence against Kohberger. All right. And so, because they're not using the evidence against him, even if they were to give it back to him, and let's just say this is the tree, right? And here's your poisonous tree stuff here and whatnot, right? You found something illegal over here, or contamination or mishandling of the SNP profile. You'd have to cut this limb off, and anything that is found off of this limb. But that wouldn't have anything to do with this limb over here to the side. Because what they were able to do is take the STR profile that they created from the knife sheath, and from there, they tested it to the trash, which came back to a match to the father of the suspect. And then once in custody, they were able to test it to Bryan Kohberger directly, which is the match. So they kind of draw everything out right here. And in my opinion, I think it seems pretty accurate. Let's see. But, do I think that there could be any like hurdles in this case? I think that there's a few. When you look at for instance, the warrant that was used, or the information that was used to acquire the warrant for the cell phone pings. And basically what it is saying that because of his knowledge in criminal justice, because of his education, and because of his, the content in his, that he used for his, I guess his, one of his reports, which utilized that Reddit, survey, that those things, and his possible knowledge of how to, or his knowledge of knowing to turn his phone off during the commission of a crime, I don't think is enough evidence to violate this man's rights to go and see where his whereabouts were on specific days and times. I think it's him. Don't get me wrong. I just think that that's very weak, in my opinion. Let me pull that up so I can show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. Where was it? Where was it? I'll find it in a second. Bear with me, y'all. Right here. So it says, based on information provided by WSU website, Kohberger is currently a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for the Pullman Police Department, we learned that Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. These records also showed that Kohberger wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Kohberger wrote in the essay that he had an interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data and public safety operations. Kohberger also posted on a Reddit survey, which can be found in an open source internet search. The survey asked the participants to provide information and understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. As part of this investigation, law enforcement obtained search warrants to determine cellular devices that utilize cell towers in close proximity to the King Road residence on November 13th between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. After determining that Kohberger was associated both with the 2015 White Elantra and the 8458 phone, investigators reviewed these search warrant returns. A query on the 8458 phone, and these returns did not show that the 8458 phone utilizing cellular towers in close proximity to the King Road residence between 3 and 5 a.m. Based on my training and experience and conversations with law enforcement officers that specialize in the utilization of cellular telephone records as a part of this investigation, individuals can either leave their cellular phone at a different location before committing a crime or turn their cellular phone off prior to going to a location to commit a crime. This is done by subjects in an effort to avoid alerting law enforcement that their cellular device associated with them was within a particular area where the crime was committed. I also know that on numerous occasions, subjects will survey an area where they intend to commit a crime prior to the date of the crime. Depending on these circumstances, this could be done in a few days before or several months prior to the commission of the crime. During these types of surveillance, it's possible that an individual would not leave their cellular device or a separate location or turn it off since they did not plan to commit the offense on that particular day. So based on all that, on December 23rd, I applied for and was granted a search warrant for historical phone records between the 12th and the 14th for the 8458 phone. And they received the records and indicated that the phone was subscribed to Bryan Kohberger, an address in Albertsville, Pennsylvania, and the account been open since June 23rd, 2022. And that the historical cell site location, CSLI, after receiving this information, I consulted with an FBI special agent that is a certified member of the CAS team. Right. And hold on. Members of CAS are certified with FBI to provide expert testimony in the field of historical CSLI, and are required to pass extensive training. So before I get too far into it, basically what they're saying was his phone didn't show up on the cell tower warrants from 3 to 5. And so they're saying, well, based on what he would have known, from his experience and education, that he would have known to turn his phone off. So his phone not being there is evidence against him. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't make sense as far as like, that's not enough to get a warrant. Now they go on to say that, there was surveillance on the house on multiple occasions, right? Now, if they had somebody come forward and say, hey, we saw why the launcher part back there on multiple occasions. Okay. But even at that, that's too vague because that doesn't indicate Bryan Kohberger was parked back there on multiple occasions. It would have had to have been somebody saying Bryan Kohberger was parked there on multiple occasions, for me, in my opinion, to be enough for a warrant. But again, I'm not a judge. I'm not an attorney or a lawyer. I just don't think that that's enough. He would have known, so that's enough to violate his rights. That's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, that is going to come part of this entire case. And the worry about that is, because if that gets thrown out, it doesn't necessarily throw out the rest of the stuff. But I think it does throw out, like, for instance, the historical stuff, and how many times he was there, trying to build the case against him and that, of prior stuff. And, that's something that, the jury is going to hear because, if they find people that aren't well-versed in this case, right, and they don't know much about it, all they're going to hear is that, this PhD student on some random night went in there and committed this quadruple homicide. That may not be necessarily like the case, so to speak. Yeah, you had surveillance and you had those things, and those things may not be used in this case because I honestly, well, who knows? They haven't tried to throw it out yet. I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar with procedure when it comes to this aspect. I'm gonna try to get a lawyer I'm gonna see if I can get a lawyer on the channel and see if they can explain it to us. Like, hey, at what point can something get thrown out? Like, for instance, his historical cell phone pings. At what point does that get thrown out? Like, can that be thrown out at this point? Does it have to? I would assume by now that some sort of paperwork would have been put up if, once the discovery was handed over and things were, wanting to be, thrown out or not. I would assume that would have happened by now. If it hasn't, does that mean that perhaps there was more to that search warrant? Maybe. I'd like to actually see the search warrant itself. I'm not sure if we have it. We have a lot. I'll go through them and find out. If you guys know if there is a search warrant. So if you guys have questions, just put in the little, it's me by myself, so I don't see everything. But if you guys got a question for me, just make sure you put a little couple of stars to catch my attention. And I'll make sure, and I'll show you an example. I almost misspelled question. There you go, just like that. So, I don't know, that's interesting. But yeah, I don't think this is enough, in my opinion. But like I mentioned before, it could be. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Let me see. All right, I got one right here. Acting is defense trying to claim that the SNP could be from a different individual, because that doesn't hold up either. I don't think so. So in the responses, it was saying that the defense is claiming that they're not really claiming that the DNA isn't Kohberger's. They're claiming that the DNA was placed there by somebody else, right? And so they're not questioning whether or not there's somebody else's that is somebody else's DNA. Now they do say that there was other DNA found at the scene, but as of December 17th, it was unknown. Well, what we know is that of December 19th is when the genetic tree was complete, and they had the name Bryan Kohberger and gave that name to the Moscow Police Department per the New York Times article, right? And so as of December 17th, not only were those other unknown DNA samples unknown, but so was the one that would eventually point to Bryan Kohberger. And so I think that was a tactic, in my opinion, to raise some reasonable doubt. They're not necessarily saying that they were still unknown, but they were unknown at that time. And, the question that they're asking is, was the focus still just on Bryan Kohberger and not these other individuals? Was the same, genetic tree and things done for those DNA samples as well? Now, they're not indicating whether or not if they're still, unknown. If they are, I think that's a big issue, obviously. But if they're not unknown anymore and they've been identified and explained, then I think it's just a tactic to create reasonable doubt while we don't have all the information, because the gag order is so tight. But the claim from the defense side is that law enforcement targeted Bryan Kohberger and just eyed in on him and didn't look at anybody else, and that the DNA was planted by one of many law enforcement officers that was there. I don't think they say that it was deliberately planted, just that it was planted. And so that could mean, what do you call it? Accidental planting it by, let's just say, somebody who handled the knife had shook hands with Kohberger or something earlier in the day. Let's see. I'll scroll up to the top, see if I find anything. I hadn't seen any questions. Let me see. Nobody's notification went on. Man, that's horrible. YouTube does that to me sometimes. I've seen that where people say that they haven't got notified. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. And they used an MVAC on the 1122 house. Did they use an MVAC on his car? Be honest with you, I'm not even sure what an MVAC is. I'm assuming it's some sort of like high, intense vacuum. I would assume that they did something of that nature. It sounded like they took that car apart, to be honest with you. So, I would assume that they did. Let's see. Oh yeah, guys! On Monday, we got Shay and Melissa Jade on the show. We'll be going live at 7:35 p.m. Eastern. Big Blue should be back, and so should be and so should Jaime. I'm sorry about that. I'm all over my words today. So I'm gonna go through this. I'm just gonna see if there is, the cell phone ping search warrant amongst all this information, but I don't think it is, because I think it was prior to, it was December 23rd, 2012 or 2022. I'm sorry. So December 23rd, 2022 is when he got the order, and none of those things are released. I wonder if there's a way somebody can do a Freedom of Information Act type of thing and get that search warrant, since everything else has been put up, but that warrant isn't there. I'd love to see what they had at that point, because at that point they had his name, obviously, but they couldn't use it. You couldn't use his name on December 23rd because they weren't going to use the FBI genetic tree as a means of finding Kohberger, right? They weren't going to use that, or for prosecuting him. I'm sorry. So, in my opinion, I wonder if we can get that. I've never done one of those Freedom of Information stuff, those FOIAs. If anybody knows or knows how, send me an email. I'd be interested in figuring that out, because I think that would be an interesting, that have a lot of information about this case that we don't know, in my opinion, that has to point more towards Kohberger. And like I said, I don't see anything in here that's to dismiss that evidence. All right. Is Big Blue still doing the Truffle Shuffle at 40K subs? I think so. I think it was 40K. It may have been 50, but I know at 40, a lot of folks have been asking me to take the glasses off. I'm going to do that. So we're pretty close to that. Meg Pico's question: will the medical examiner be back soon? I really liked her. We're still talking about that. She's got some issues about coming on a podcast with work. So we're trying to figure out a way around that. So Cammy Q says, does the defense have the opportunity to test the sheath for BK's DNA independently of the state's testing? That's a good question. I would assume so. They would have access to those type of things. I think that I would assume so. Especially if you're questioning, the validity of the DNA. But I think that the fact that they're not doing that right now is one of the reasons why people are saying that he's not really challenging the fact that it's his DNA. He's just kind of challenging like how his DNA got there. And he's also saying somehow one of the state witnesses are going to be his alibi somehow. Let's see. It could be under all these seal order react, to be honest with you. Any of you guys know if the and I'm gonna probably release this on the replay of this for everyone, but so those watching on the replay, anybody familiar if that search warrant for Kohberger's cell phone pings was ever released? So I know that there was one, and it was, I think it said it was AT&T ordered to seal and redact. Let's see. This is it. This is to seal the search warrant, turn search warrants. Mm-hmm. No, this ain't the right one. I know there was one of them that was it was the state's. There's an AT&T, the return of search warrant. I think this might be actually it. No, this is January 6th. Right here, yeah. So all it says is out on 23rd of December, Corporal Brett Payne obtained a search warrant for AT&T. The search warrant was served on December 23rd by email. On December 23rd, they received the email from AT&T containing the requested information. So this is the receipt of inventory of warrant on the 23rd of December. Detective Lawrence Maury by email served to AT&T. Is this the order? Let's see. And the title matter, this court having herefore issued a search warrant. A search warrant being served along law enforcement and the return of the warrant being duly made as directed. Let's blah, blah, blah. See, this doesn't have like why though. It just says that they're going to give it to give him the information that there was information. Let's see if this is it. Yeah, see, it says here, Brett Payne having given me proof upon oath this day showing probable cause establishing grounds for issuing search warrant and probable cause to believe property consists of certain evidence regarding the investigation into the crimes of the homicides on 1122 King Road, Moscow, is on the AT&T account associated with the phone number, and it's redacted, but it's fairly positive it's Kohberger's. Between November 12th at midnight to November 14th at midnight Pacific Standard Time, information should include user account information, location data, and store communications held by AT&T described in further details follows. So it's just saying like, all the information that they want from their email addresses called detail records, cell site information. Please provide the information to Brett Payne. And that's the end of the search warrant. So this is what they would have given basically to AT&T. Like, hey, this is our search warrant. Here is our warrant. We want this information. But it doesn't say what the proof is. All it says is Brett Payne having given me proof upon oath showing probable cause. Well, where the hell is that proof? That's the part I don't like about this. I'll be honest with you. That's the part I don't like about it. This is why, like early on in this investigation, I was iffy about this. I think Kohberger did it, but I think these guys just. I'm concerned about I'm not concerned that they got the wrong guy. I think they got the wrong guy, but I feel that, this guy could get away with this because of crap like this. Like, this is your search warrant. Now, Idaho could be different, but I always thought in the search warrant, you would have why you have probable cause, not just that they showed you probable cause. Like, for instance, in the Ron Logan search warrant, it states, we're looking for knives and guns and things because those things were used in this crime. We suspect Ron Logan because he created a fake alibi. He did all these things. This is why we suspected it's him. We want a search warrant so that we can go onto his property and check for all these things out. Right? Here in Idaho, all you got to do is just say, the judge said, hey, they gave me proof. That's enough. That's enough. It's not enough. I want to see what the hell that damn proof is. I want to know right there, having given me proof. What's the proof? Let's see it. I love the Joker. I have 2 tattoos of the Joker, actually. Can the defense call Bethany to testify in the state if the state chooses to not have her called? Not unless they make her a witness. All right. So you can only cross conversate, whatever. I can't even think of the dang name off the top of my head right now. A person if they're not your witness, right? And if she was a witness in there, so Bethany can be called as a witness for both the state and the prosecution, or the prosecution and the defense, in my opinion, for my knowledge. Let me look that up real quick, because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how true it is. So let's find out. Can a person be a witness to the state or and defense? Yes. In simple terms, yes, it can. The defense may call the prosecution witness during their case. All right. So, but they have to list them as a witness, in my opinion, from my knowledge. I've been in a situation, and I've seen a situation where I've been in court, and I've seen a situation where the prosecution has, I remember if it was the prosecution or the state, but one of them had a witness that the other one wanted to, talk with, but they didn't list them as a witness. And because the other one had them as a witness, they thought that they were going to have the ability to talk to this person and didn't have to list them as a witness. I want to say it was the defense's witness, because I think the state went first and usually goes first. And what ended up happening was the state went first, and they did their case, and then the defense came up, and they had a few people, and then they rested, and not everybody that they had as witnesses were called. And the state was like, whoa, like, we wanted to, talk with one of their witnesses, and they couldn't. So if the state, and that's in Texas, so Idaho could be different, but from what I know and from what I understand, is if the defense wanted to talk to Bethany, and let's just say that Bethany has something to say, then perhaps if they don't call her up, the defense is kind of screwed in that situation. You know what I'm saying? But I think that could be the angle that the defense could be looking at. They might say, hey, you know what? Bethany doesn't know anything. Let's just say, let's look at this hypothetically, right? Let's just say that Bethany didn't hear or see anything that night, right? And that's why none of her testimony is in there. And she ends up not being a witness because she didn't see anything. And the defense is like, hey, we have a person here whose statement says that they didn't see anything. There's a good chance they're not going to bring this person up as a witness. We can create reasonable doubt if we say that this person has exculpatory evidence, and say that, we plan on getting that evidence out of this person during testimony. And knowing that this person's not going to go up there. And then the defense can argue, it's like, well, we had somebody, but they didn't bring them up. Just like they're saying, we had someone, but they didn't want to do the preliminary hearing, right? Even though the grand jury aspect of it is something that is common in legal cases like this. And so I wouldn't have been surprised if that's what the angle is more of a tactic to create reasonable doubt in the future. That she's playing chess, not checkers, right? So she's thinking to herself, and by she, I'm talking about Ann Taylor. All right, let's create some reasonable doubt by throwing out there right now that a state's witness has exculpatory evidence. We're not going to call that witness as a witness for our own, so we're going to wait for their testimony. And we're going to pick somebody that we don't think that the state is going to actually call upon. Right? Now, it may not even be Bethany. It could be somebody else. It doesn't specify Bethany. But we're going to pick somebody that the state is not going to call upon, and we're going to create this sense of reasonable doubt based on saying that somebody that the state has as a witness that refused, and they're going to use that term, they refused to bring them onto the stand, even though they had every opportunity to list these people as witnesses as well, right? So this is my Nostradamus hat, guys. The state's going to say something to the effect like, or the defense going to say hey, they had a witness and they didn't want to call him up because they knew that they had exculpatory evidence. There's your reasonable doubt. And to some people, they might fall for that. But you guys and I, we're not falling for that. We know what they're going to do. We're one step ahead, right? Let's see. And I'm just being sarcastic, by the way. Maybe. Interesting, with the alibi filing, we learned that the data hasn't put him at the scene, or his defense would be explaining non-nefarious reasons he was there or at the house instead of driving that night. Well, yeah, his phone was off. So I think, we know that his data doesn't put him at the scene. Not at the night of the incident. No. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Steelers fan, you're funny. I see. Spencer B goes, the defense gets to impeach any witnesses presented by the prosecution. Yeah, but they have to be presented. If they don't present them, even though they call them up or have them on a list to be called, I think that's a question there. Definitely law enforcement handling and paperwork is very suspect. Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. He will try to say crime happened at a different time, probably at some point where he is seen on camera far away from the King Road. Well, he can't say that. They're going to have to try to get somebody that's some sort of expert to come out and say that, right? Maybe get their own medical examiner to go over the information from what the state has to determine if there was a possibility that the TOD was earlier than expected while he was in Pullman or something, or afterwards. I can see that. I can see them trying to do that, during court. But I think there's a lot of evidence that points to this crime happening between 4 and 4:25. And it's not just, Bryan Kohberger not having his phone on during that time. It's, seeing the white car, the audible, sounds coming from the Ring device next door, seeing the car leaving after that, those type of things. Also, the victim's phones are also going to indicate that. And apparently also, according to the probable cause affidavit, the surviving roommates. Now, a lot of folks, will say, hey, what does, the surviving roommates' phones, what could they possibly have to determine, the time of this occurrence, right? Did they take a picture? Did they take a video of the suspect or something like that? And I don't think that's the case. I think it's, 4:00 in the morning. Dylan and Bethany are probably asleep then. If Dylan is awoken by what she thinks is Kaylee playing with the dog, and, she wakes up from that, one of the first things that she might do is check her phone, or even if she does call or text people on her phone to see if everything's okay or whatever has been rumored, those things are going to have a timestamp, and those things are going to determine based on what she's saying. She's like, yeah, I woke up and, I heard the dog. I texted people. All right, boom. What time was that text coming in? She might say around 4 a.m. They go download the data and the information, find out, sure enough, there's a text message at 4:05. Boom. It corroborates. Everything corroborates. The video of the car outside, boom, corroborates. Everything lines up. And doesn't necessarily say that it's Kohberger in the car or Kohberger in the house, but it does tell me that it was one person in that car, because that vehicle wasn't driving around while all the noises were happening, right? And we got to remember, it's a one way in, one way out. And there's a camera from 1112 that is pointing at the Queen Road intersection that a person would have had to have driven to come out of. So law enforcement would have known if that white vehicle pulled into that area, if they pulled out before, not 420, 425, they would have known those things. And that would have given them, in my opinion, I would have thought that maybe perhaps, is it possible somebody waited outside in the car? I guess so. Those things, that is possible, that somebody could have waited in the car. But I think it's just one person. I don't think there was one person that got dropped off and then this guy was circling around, things like that. I don't think that's feasible. Let's see. I think Brian's car info is going to show all the meat and potatoes in this case. Maybe. I mean, what does the total lack of DNA in Bryan Kohberger's car of the victims mean? Does that necessarily mean that there was no DNA whatsoever? Or does that mean that they would have thought there would be more DNA and there was just a small amount? Because to me, if there's any amount in there, then guys, my 85 is 110% guilt, right? You know what I'm saying? Now, I already think he did it, but there's a difference between thinking somebody did something and somebody being guilty of something. OJ is a pretty big example of that. And so, I think, and the reason why, like, for instance, my 80% thinking that he's guilty on this situation is the 20% that doesn't. It's not necessarily that I don't think he is. It's more like, all right, are the phone pings going to fly? Is that search warrant going to fly? That type of stuff. These motions going to go through, things like this. The fact that he didn't have DNA in the car and there's no explanation for it per the defense, but that doesn't mean that that they didn't give them. All right. So the defense has argued about maybe not so much explanation, but results for a lot of the evidence, right? They've gotten 51 terabytes worth of information and evidence, but they don't have like specifics. So in a bunch of these court documents, from what I understand, going back and forth, it sounds like, the prosecution said, all right, here's all the evidence that we have from from this entire time. Here's it all, right? Boom. Let's give it all to you. And then, wrong one. Here's all of it. We'll give that all to you. And they have it all, but they don't have the specifics, right? They might have like 10 hours worth of tape on something, but don't know exactly where in those 10 hours that the prosecution is going to use their evidence. Out of that 10-hour tape, the prosecution might only use 3 minutes, right? And so the defense has been complaining like, hey, they're not pointing out, the results or things of that nature. And so maybe perhaps they did give information as to an explanation as to why the car was clean, but not in those words. It could have been as simple as they turned over, some documents that indicated that there was, some kind of stain remover found in the car. They may not have given them a report saying that they believe that the stain remover was used to clean, DNA or things of that nature. That those words may have never been said to the defense team, and the defense may be taking advantage of that wording to try to create a tactic for reasonable doubt. That's what I'm seeing, or possibly, and it's possible that maybe the car was clean. We did have a forensic medical legal death investigator on, and she did state that there is ways to clean a car and not get DNA everywhere, or not show that there was cleaning involved by using certain stain removers. But more so, she was talking about the preparation of the car. If somebody knows what they're doing, preparing the car prior to, especially if this person knows that they're going to go commit this crime, right? Maybe they're going to prepare that car with some stuff, maybe some seat covers, things of that nature, and isolate himself to one general area so he's not having to clean the entire car. She seemed fairly confident with with a person who knew or was in the know could have a car, commit a crime like this, and sit in a car afterwards. And because of the preparation of the car and what was done afterwards and being able to clean with the knowledge that he may have, come out clean and there be no indication of a clean job outside of the car being very clean, right? So let's see. I'll answer a couple more before we call it a show. You're good, Gavin. You're good. Let's see. We had 3 Hyundais, all different. I can't only download in mine into Blue Link phone, so I shut my phone off. Driving all night doesn't want download. Would shut it off and no way to charge only. Yeah, I mean, I get the argument that maybe perhaps he turned his phone off and he wanted to charge his phone. He goes on a drive at night in a state that he's not very familiar, in an area he's not very familiar, in a rural area, because he's only been there for not very long, right? So, I mean, it's a rural area. There's not very many streets, so I guess it wouldn't take long to learn them. But at night, with little lights out, little light pollution in that area, drive around for 3 hours without his phone through rural area. I mean, maybe. But, what are the chances that he turns his phone off right at the time that this crime was committed and turns it back on right afterwards? I mean, maybe not right at, but around that time, right? Turned his phone off at around 3, came back on at 4:48. So, for hour and 48 minutes, turns his phone off. And during that time, this crime is committed. And DNA is also found on a knife sheath underneath the body of a victim that belongs to him. And their only explanation is that it was planted by law enforcement or somebody holding that knife sheath. We also know that there's a white car driving around that is similar enough to his, whether it's 2013, 2015, those two vehicles, Hyundai Elantras, are very similar. Without a front license plate in that area as well. So, the likelihood of all those things happening are very slim. If somebody wanted to frame Kohberger, they would have had to have also had a vehicle that was very similar to his, taken off the front license plate, transplanted his DNA onto the knife sheath, and had known that he was going on late night drives and known that he turns his phone off during those late night drives and known exactly at what time or what window his phone was going to be off to have committed this crime. And those things just had to have aligned on a night where, it was quiet and, Kaylee was back and the victims were asleep at that time. Those things all have to line up. It's for me, when I look at, could this have occurred? Could something have happened? If you were to tell me hey, what would it have taken for Jack DeCord to have committed this crime? I would work it backwards. Or what would it have taken for Jack Showalter or anybody, right? Just work it backwards. And the more unlikely or the bigger the story has to get to fit all the pieces, the more likely it's not possible. And that kind of works in the same factor here. For Bryan Kohberger to be innocent, that story has to be wild as hell. Wild as hell. In my opinion, the DNA was the easiest thing to plant for. With education, I'm not surprised. With his education, not surprised. Plan for. Yeah, that's true. Getting rid of the DNA in the car may have been one of the things that he had planned for. That is true. That's true. Given his education, that could be possible. And this will be the last one, y'all. Meg comes down saying, why would he want to drive at night with visual snow? That's if he still suffers from it. Well, the fact that he's still on his vegan diet, which that diet was so that he could subdue the symptoms, right? So that he could control the symptoms of the visual snow, some of those extra symptoms that he had, that feeling of emptiness and the whole 9 yards, right? So he didn't choose to be a vegan because he wanted to, you know, he was against animals and or people eating animals and things of that nature. It had to do more with the effects that he had. And so the fact that he's still living by those, by that meal plan, either it's just a lifestyle of his that he likes, but to the degree that he's at, where he told his family members that they had to buy new pots and pans because he couldn't have anything that touched meat before, tells me that he's either afraid of those symptoms coming back or that they still persist. And so maybe not the visual snow aspect of it, but the other aspect, the feeling empty, trying to feel for something, try to, have some sort of sense of feelings. Goodford said, I could possibly buy that he sold the knife at a local dealer and the local LE buy them as extras if they have a problem with one of their own, not knowing they did not clean it all. But that would have like been like, all right, well, we're going to just go randomly buy knives in case we come across a situation where we randomly buy stuff. All right. Just in case we can't come across a situation we can't solve. For 7 weeks isn't really a long time. When you look at the, some of these cases, how long it takes for them to solve. I mean, the Long Island serial killer just got solved, and that was from 2017. Right. And so, 7 weeks isn't really that long for, in my opinion, somebody to go, oh, snap, we're getting desperate. Let's frame someone. Right. And then they would have just had to have gotten lucky, right? That the person that sold that knife and knife sheath, that they didn't know, they just picked one out, because how would they have known Bryan Kohberger sold it there? They would have just gone and bought a few of them, right? And they would have just gotten lucky that the person who sold that knife and knife sheath just so happens to drive a white car that doesn't have a front license plate, and just so happens that his phone was off during the time of the incident. I think that scenario doesn't jive with me, my man. Doesn't jive. But is it possible? Yeah, I just don't think it's possible. But thank you guys. I want to. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you guys. I want to say thank you to all our members, our mods. I know this was probably one of the easier shows to do because it's just our members. Not much modding needing to be done. But thank you for all the respect and the support. I'll be doing this more often, maybe twice, 3 times a month. This is just the first one for the month of August. We'll be back on Monday. Melissa, Jade, and Shay will be on the show. Don't want to miss it. If you haven't checked out my conversation with Jules of All Trade, we spoke the other day, and last night my conversation with Jaime. Go check out those things. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy that content. Without further ado, y'all have a safe weekend. Peace out.